on us to go, well, he was this rock and roll pirate who made these amazing lyrics and sang in this way and apparently allergic to shirts. And watch this performance, from the BBC in 1977 and just, tears people's heads off. And you go, well, let's see, that's who he was, and that's why he's important.
Rock, metal, prog, and everything in between. Welcome to this episode of Talkin' Rock with Meltdown. Don't forget to follow the audio-only Talkin' Rock podcast on all podcast platforms. And now, it's time for today's conversation. Here's Meltdown.
Now, do you get a nickel every time that they play It's a Long Way to the Top if you want to rock and roll before a Metallica show?
I don't get anything, but I certainly hope that Metallica is reporting that to the proper authorities.
I'm just teasing you. You know what, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Of course.
Yeah. I mean,
no, it's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. Metallica and that song go hand in hand. And it's like as soon as you hear that opening riff, you're like, okay, this show is about to begin.
Absolutely. No, and it's that kind of thing that we can only hope that people continue to do into the future, because it just reminds people or introduces them to the first time to who Bon was, what he was all about, what AC/DC was, early on in their career. And it's every generation you have to educate people for the first time and pass it down to the next generation. So God bless Metallica for doing that. Thank you.
So John, before we get started here, let's talk about the role you play. So you kind of told me a little bit off the air, but for people that are just watching this right now, you work for the Bon Scott estate, correct?
Correct. Yeah, his family, which was when he passed, he had two brothers that basically took over, his estate, and they have kids who are now, the next generation taking it over. So, a few years ago when Bon was going to turn 75. They decided to create a small team of people that, we set up a website and social media, and we started doing some merchandising and, events like this one, and, cleaning up events that were sort of rogue in the past and, getting some bootleggers out of the way and stuff. And, just things like registering trademarks and his name and likeness and stuff like that, which is something that, a lot of deceased rock people don't do. So, you have to do all of that stuff if you want to like establish your business and move it into the future. So that's what we've been working on.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, I can't recall when he passed away, but this year will be 45 years, correct?
Correct. It's February of 1980. He passed away in London. Yeah.
Yeah. So it just passed. Yeah. And Bon Scott and his legacy is something else. It's like some of those songs, I mean, they just seem to live forever. Have you seen AC/DC on this latest tour?
I have. Yeah. I went to the Foxborough Mass show.
Okay.
Up at the Patriots Stadium, and it was unbelievable. I've seen him a bunch. I worked with the band for about 15 years when I was at Sony previously, and we did album reissues and box sets and DVD stuff like Family Jewels and Plug Me In and the Backtracks box set that looks like a guitar amp and actually is a guitar amp. So I got to see him a bunch during like the Black Ice era, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame era, the Rock or Bust era. So yeah, but this show was unbelievable. I mean, Brian was killing it. I was a little nervous because of his health issues that he's had with his hearing and stuff, but it was phenomenal.
Yeah, you saw the show, if I'm not mistaken, right after the Detroit show.
Yeah. Yep. That was the next one. Yeah.
Yeah, they went from here to there. So it's funny. I was just telling you off the air that I've been in this business for 35 years, and AC/DC is one of the bands I've never had a chance to meet, interact with, or interview. It's crazy. So have you met those guys a few times, Angus and that?
Yeah. When I was doing the packages, Angus and Malcolm at the time were, they're in charge of everything. So I would have to go and present, back in those days, it was still printed out, mock-ups of the packaging and stuff like that. And, have to go and actually meet with them and show it and stuff. So that was always a great time because they're so, if they know that what you're talking about, they're immediately bought in, so it was a great period.
Yeah, they have to keep their mailbox money, I call it, because it's like with all those AC/DC songs that have ended up on commercials and whatnot, I just imagine well, not so much anymore, but Angus just walking to his mailbox every day and just opening up check after check.
The big giant one that just says, $1 million or whatever.
Man,
Yeah,
oh man, their stuff is
totally.
there's so many. So have you had a chance to meet Brian?
I did meet Brian once. Yeah, he was delightful. I mean, just the nicest guy. He was doing the after the show. It was in Chicago actually, after a show at the United Center, and he stayed for 2 hours and talked to everybody after the gig, and it was phenomenal to spend some time with him. Him and Cliff were the ones that stuck around after the gig.
That's great. So how long have you worked for the Bon Scott estate?
About 5 years now.
Okay, so before this,
Yeah.
you so are you just like this huge AC/DC fan that just happens to stumble into working with the guys and then doing this for Bon Scott?
Well, I worked for a division at Sony Music for about 20 years called Legacy.
Mhm.
That was we did all the box sets and reissues and deluxe edition of albums and stuff like that. And I was actually in charge of their A&R department for, a good decade. And during that time, you'd get to know people and they trust you. And I did a lot of work with like the Johnny Cash estate and the Billy Joel team. And, so during COVID, when things were going a little sideways with the business, I actually decided to leave and start my own company, which basically is doing all this stuff, but working for artists and estates rather than for the record label that owns the recordings. So it opened up a whole batch of opportunities that have nothing to do with the records, but it's name and likeness and events and merchandising and some legal stuff that's a little it's minutia, but it's really fascinating of what you need to do to protect yourself out there and actually monetize things that in the right way. So obviously we're very respectful of the band and everything that they're doing, and they actually have all the music and they do their own thing, but we're just trying to be out there reminding people or educating people of who Bon was, why he was important, why he was this sort of, he means a lot to a certain demographic of people. I was interviewing Scott Ian about him the other day, and he's just like, he says AC/DC with Bon Scott is his favorite band of all time.
Mm.
And he collects the figures and the posters and so he means a lot to certain people, but if we don't do this job, the interest will wane over the years and people will just sort of forget about who he was. So it's on us to go, well, he was this rock and roll pirate who made these amazing lyrics and sang in this way and was apparently allergic to shirts and all of that fun stuff. So and you say, hey, watch this interview with him, and it just says how he was, or watch this performance from the BBC in 1977, and just tears people's heads off, and you go, well, let's see, that's who he was and that's why he's important. So it's a thing you have to do all the time, or the interest sort of wanes.
Mhm. Yeah, I know Scott pretty well. I never knew that about him. Of course, we know that he's a Kiss fan, and the whole thing.
Oh yeah.
But and Scott's bandmate Frank Bello is a friend of mine, and he shares a birthday with Bon, as does my brother on July 9th. So you got this second annual birthday bash coming up, and this is happening in New York City at the Bowery Electric, and you got some pretty cool guests. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we started it last year because we actually figured out that we had a trademarking opportunity to actually make it, but also protect against other people doing Bon Scott gigs or events or whatever. So we made our own, and we started last year with our first one, and then this year we're doing a second one, and we're modeling it really after the like what the Hendrix estate Experience Hendrix does
Yeah.
with their Red House tour, where there isn't a person that's up there pretending to be Jimi Hendrix. It's like they invite a lot of different guitar players, and everyone does their own thing, and brings their own stamp to it, and singers. So for this, we've got sort of a backing band, and then we have about a dozen different singers who will come up and do a track or two each. And it's all people from New York that are, in rock and metal bands and just love Bon. And so when we put the word out, everyone, was excited and came to us. And, it's funny because you say, okay, well, what song do you want to do? And everybody had a different song that they wanted because
Oh, that's good.
everyone's
That makes it easy
uh,
for you.
Exactly. So, the people that wanted to do Sin City or, It's a Long Way to the Top or Rock and Roll Damnation or, not everyone was like, I'll do Highway to Hell. So, so it's been fantastic. And the reception from the music community, in the club and everything has just been fantastic. So yeah, this year we have, Corey Glover from Living Color. He will actually sing Highway to Hell.
Oh, no
Uh,
kidding.
yeah, we've got Jimmy Coons from Cactus, Dave Anthony from 1010 Mojo, Peter Shaw from Trans-Siberian Orchestra, Shilpa Ray, who's amazing, Devin Marie, Paul Bertolino. I mean, it's people that are well established in their own right, and then they're just huge fans, so they're going to come, and it's going to be loud, it's going to be hot, but I guarantee it'll be fun.
Yeah, so that's happening July 9th, as we were just talking about the official U.S. tribute. I don't know. Has there ever been a documentary about Bon? I'm sure there has, right?
Yeah, we actually did one with the ABC, Australian Broadcasting Company, about 3 years ago,
Oh, okay.
as part of their sort of Australian story series. And the band was completely involved. Angus approved everything. Brian actually was the host of it.
Hmm.
You can see it on YouTube, Australian Story, Bon Scott. The whole episode is up on the ABC channel. But yeah, it was a really good chance for the family to show that, while AC/DC is a part of his story and he's a part of AC/DC's story, his life was actually much more than that. And he was in bands before AC/DC, and how he grew up and how the family moved from Scotland to Australia the same way the Youngs did, and his interest in music and how he ended up getting to AC/DC, and then that phenomenal five and a half year run that they had with him until he tragically passed. So that's a really good doc if your listeners want to check it out.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to watch it. I never saw that before. I was thinking about this earlier today that like I said, I've been in this business for a minute and growing up in the 80s and stuff, there were rock stars. Like Bon Scott passed before I became a rock fan. But there were rock stars. And I don't know if it's because we live in a time now where, maybe drinking's frowned upon or whatever the case is, but there doesn't seem to be a rock star like a Bon Scott anymore.
Yeah, I think that the legend of those guys, I think it has to do with the amount of information that we were given, because, back then it would be an album a year probably with one little picture on it, and that's kind of all you got. Or, you'd open the gatefold of, Judas Priest album, and like that one picture, that's all you had to go on of who these people were. And so you sort of, you talk to your friends or you read a little article in Circus or whatever, and you have to form your opinion that way. And now everybody's just doing everything all the time, and you can see, you know, Rob Halford in his underwear, on his Instagram or whatever. So it's, I think that a lot of the mystery has been taken out of it, which I think really led to, the legends of those guys back then.
But
And
almost, but today it'd almost be easier to be like a huge rock star. Could you imagine if cell phones and stuff were around Bon Scott's out partying? I mean, they'd travel all around. You could imagine, right?
I can imagine. Yes, yes.
I mean,
No, and
that'd
it's
be insane.
And it's funny, we actually, another initiative that we have that the family has is, people that did get to see him and did like photograph him with, old school cameras. And there was a guy from San Francisco who gave us a bunch of photos that he had just developed them. He's like, I think I have this film, and he had all these pictures of them playing at the Great American Music Hall in San Francisco. And like, he got to hang with them backstage, and they're like eating the catering and tuning up their guitars. And, Bond's like trying on this guy's leather jacket and everything. So if people have that kind of stuff from when he was with us, you can go to our website, bondscottofficial.com, and you can submit a story and we'll publish it with your pictures and everything. So,
That's
sort of a
great.
little fan community. Yeah.
That's awesome. So out of the records that Bon was on, what do you think is where was the peak, in your opinion?
I mean, I think Highway to Hell is that was they were getting to the best place. I mean, I love Powerage, and that's a lot of the fans' favorites. Um, but you know, I think Highway to Hell, song for song, is just the best record.
Mm.
But that's just my opinion. And the thing, you know, about people of our generation, you know, and this is something that Scott talked about. It was very confusing, you know, because he ended up passing away February of 1980, and Highway to Hell was just like kind of coming up here in the States,
Mm.
and then Back in Black comes out, and it's like, oh, it's this other thing that they're doing now. But then they decide to release the Dirty Deeds album, which had never come out here. So that came out in 1981 for the first time in
Wait, that
America.
came out here in America in 1981.
Yep, with a different album cover and everything. They sort of re-released it here.
Okay.
And then the Let There Be Rock movie comes out, which is like Let There Be Rock was a different album that was already out, and then it's this other singer, but he's now dead, and it's the band now has this other guy. So it was a very confusing couple of years, I think, for people even that were huge fans, you know, sort of after he passed away. So, you know, I'm glad that the history's been set straight over the years, and people now understand what his role was and what he was doing. Because
That's it.
we
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, because what you know what he did, writing rock and roll songs about rock and roll,
Mm.
you know, amongst other things, but girls and cars and you know, beating people up and stuff like that, it's a lot harder to do than people think. And a lot of people have tried and failed, or have written songs that, you know, were cool for a minute and then but don't last. But I mean, his music and what the way he was able to do it, almost like Chuck Berry or, you know, an old blues musician, where you could take something as simple as, oh, you know, people are bothering you, I'm going to go beat them up for you,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
making that into a song that is not only catchy, but it's consistent and it's delivered properly. And then had, you know, 50 years later almost is still relevant and people are singing it in stadiums all over the world is like, that's a pretty tough thing to do.
Yeah. Monster hit.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't really realize about that, about the how those records dropped and all this stuff came out in the early 80s. I'm just thinking out loud here. I wonder if that added to the monstrous success of Back in Black. All that stuff added up together.
Oh, I think it did. Yeah. I think Atlantic Records really benefited from re-releasing Dirty Deeds and then the film because they owned the film too. So I think that they really jumped on it. And I think I believe that the band was not super happy about it at the time because they wanted to move on and do the new thing. But you know, I think it really worked out because those records were on the charts together and like sort of pushing each other up
Yeah.
for those, you know, couple of years.
Now, how much of Back in Black was written when he passed away? You know?
Well, in terms of lyrics, people like to think that he wrote lyrics on that record, and he did not.
Okay.
You know, something that I know that they did do was, you know, they would always keep sort of phrases around, particularly Malcolm and Angus, you know, so something like have a drink on me, or, you know, even Hell's Bells is a phrase that people say, or you shook me all night long. I mean, that's as old of a blues song as you could possibly imagine. And Led Zeppelin has a song that goes, you shook me all night long. And, you know, so having those sort of turns of phrases, I think were probably you know, in their bank, some of their notebook somewhere. But he definitely did not write the lyrics to those songs the way that people kind of hoped that he did.
Hmm. So how close is AC/DC to the Bon Scott estate now?
They're very close. I mean, they're business partners. You know, there's publishing
Oh,
and master royalties that they do. And when the band plays live, you know, they're still doing half songs from his era. The set is literally half and half. So, you know, they work that out, and there's, you know, public performance
well,
money that comes
that
from
stuff is
that.
all
So.
like legal stuff, but
Mhm.
are like the guys like Angus and stuff. They still like touch base with the estate. I mean, they still you
Oh
know.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the brothers are, you know, the two nephews, Bond's nephews, they're his brother's kids. You know, been to a bunch of the shows and, you know, see him and stuff. And it's a great relationship.
Okay, great, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I remember, yeah. The Youngs brothers had the nephews, or I can't remember. Rhino, wasn't it Rhino Bucket that they were in? What was the no? Wait, there was a band that the Youngs brothers kids were in back in the early 90s. And I met them once. That would be as close as I got to meeting someone from AC/DC. Now I can't remember the name of them, but yeah, they were there for a minute in the early 90s. Anyways, we'll edit this in post. Don't worry about it.
Of course, yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so Bon Scott, July 9th, the official U.S. tribute that happens at the Bowery Electric in New York City. Like you said, Corey Glover, Peter Shaw, just a bunch of artists playing there that night, and that's for his 79th birthday. I guess for the 80th, you got to do something really big, huh?
Well, that's what we're hoping for. I mean, this is all building towards, next July and hoping to have something that's, even bigger, even better. So, if anyone is thinking about making it, can't go, that sort of thing, just be on the lookout for, the birthday of 80 and then beyond, because we want to just keep growing it and, just introduce new people to them. And whether it's, a Funko Pop doll or a cool t-shirt or whatever, it's just little ways to continue people thinking about them.
Well, John, thanks so much for the time. We'll push people towards the website and whatnot, and have fun at that show, man. It sounds like it's gonna be killer.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.